What is going on, Colts Nation? And welcome back to another episode of Colts Brawl. I am your host, as always, Cody Felger. Joining me, your other host, Mr. Jacob Mummer. Jacob, the Indianapolis Colts are finally winners in a game this season. They defeat the Minnesota Vikings by a score of 28-11. Really could have been 28-3 because the Colts' defense was phenomenal. I mean, the Vikings really didn't get much at all. But, overall, it was a really good game, man. What were your thoughts after the game?
It was exciting to see this team be able to perform to the level that they did, because after Jacksonville, I mean, we were just all like, what are we going to do? What's the season going to look like? But then we were able to bounce back this game and really show a glimpse of what this team could be with the new pieces that we acquired. So I'm super excited moving forward. I think it was a great team win. There wasn't, any one guy Jonathan Taylor kind of stole the show, but everybody helped. Everybody worked hard together as a unit to get the job done, and it was great to see.
Mm-hmm. It really was. And, as good as it was, unfortunately, there were a few injuries. We'll kind of touch on those real fast. The two most notable ones and the biggest ones, Malik Hooker, torn Achilles. He's out for the year. So that's really a bummer on that from that department. Paris Campbell, he had a PCL, and then it was later reported MCL injury. And the status right now, he's going to be out for a while. We don't know if that is season ending or not. Some other ones, Rocky Ascend right before the game. He had some sort of illness, had a fever. He was a last-minute kind of inactive. Frank Reich has not said a whole lot beyond he was released from the hospital on Monday. Status is still uncertain for this next week. And then Xavier Rhodes left with cramps, seems to be fine. Matthew Adams had an ankle. We haven't heard anything in the updates about him. These two injuries, though, Malik Hooker and Paris Campbell, these two both sting.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
It does, because, they're both – Paris Campbell's in his second year, Malik Hooker's in his fourth year, but still such young players that have bright futures, and you just hate to see them go down in week two. Like, that's just – you just want more from them. And I think what's more unfortunate is for Paris Campbell, because he was playing so well after week one, and there's a lot of promise that he was going to really blossom in year two, and then he goes down early, and he's uncertain right now. But these kind of injuries take some time to come back. So even if he does come back, does he come back the same? Is he as explosive? By that time, has Pittman or Pascal or Patman or Fountain kind of stepped up and taken that role? So there's a lot of uncertainty there, even outside of the injury. It's what he's going to come back as, what he's going to be able to do. And for Malik Hooker, it's just been injury prone, since he got to the NFL. And it's really unfortunate, because it's just the way it is. It's just unfortunate because, his option was his fifth year option was declined. The team was trying to make him prove what he could do, and then he tears his ACL in week two, and now he's done for the season. So he doesn't even get a chance to show potential teams what he's capable of doing. So it's unfortunate for both of these guys, but you're hoping that they can, come back strong next season or towards the end of the season.
Yeah, it really does stink for Malik Hooker. So now him and Marlon Mack both out for the year with Achilles injuries. Kind of crazy that happens back-to-back weeks for these guys. But I guess before we go kind of recapping this game, somebody pointed this out, and I want to get your thoughts on this, Jacob. Do you think that this potentially could mean that the Colts could maybe look to bring back Hooker and Mack maybe on like 1 year prove-it type deals this next year, kind of get them for a lot cheaper? Maybe you're going to get them if they were healthy this year?
Yeah, I definitely think that's in the realm of possibilities here, because, you just hate to – not that they couldn't find jobs elsewhere, but, you like to retain the talent if you can. I would think we would lean more towards re-signing Mack than we would Hooker, just because of the way how deep our safety position is right now, and the way that Julian Blackmon was able to play. It was early, and this was just kind of a flash that we got to see him, but he seemed to be doing fairly well. And, Mack is always going to be a great running back to have, but again, what are they going to look like when they come back? I think is the biggest thing here. But the Colts will have that advantage, because they'll get to see them in their rehab, and then once they get back to practices, what they look like. So I think I could see them re-signing Mack, I think, more than Hooker to one of those 1 year prove-it deals.
Yeah, and the reason why I feel like the Paris Campbell injury is a little bit more significant than Malik Hooker. Obviously, Malik Hooker is a key part of that defense, but you have a lot of depth. Lot of depth. You like Julian Blackmon. You invested in him. Paris Campbell just offers you a completely different skill set in the wide receivers that you don't really have. And just that speed burner type of player. And so that just is a real bummer that hopefully he comes back. But by the end of the season, that would be nice to have him if the Colts are vying for a playoff spot, have him come back and give a little bit of a shot in the arm to this offense. But this certainly is unfortunate for Paris Campbell. It's just it feels like he's just been really unlucky with these injuries the last couple of years. I mean, when he was with the Buckeyes, he wasn't injured at all. He didn't struggle with injuries. It's just weird how coming in the next couple of years, it's just been a lot of freak things that have just happened to him, kind of out of his control type of thing. I know he even was working to add on to, his muscle and become more durable, and then just has something, clean hit by, I believe it was Harrison Smith who made the hit, and it just, landed wrong, and it's just he's done for a while. And so it's just a real bummer that had to happen to a guy like Paris Campbell really coming on in week 1. He really had he led the team in receiving yards, receptions, all that stuff. It's just really a bummer to see a player of his caliber going down so early.
Yeah, and I think this is the season that he could have really excelled because of the wide receivers that we have currently. Because, T.Y. is still going to draw that number 1 corner. You have Pascal as well. So, I mean, Campbell was in a prime position this season to get those looks against maybe some weakened or not as good coverage in the secondary. But he was so great in week 1. And it was a clean tackle, nothing like trying to go at him or anything. It was just a clean hit. It's just, it's so unfortunate. Because, again, a guy that, with these kind of injuries, you just don't know what they're going to come back like. And he might not be able to be as explosive as he once was. And, it's unfortunate, all around. But as watching the rest of the games during week 2, this was happening to almost every team. Like Saquon Barkley tore his ACL, Nick Bosa tore his. I mean, so many guys went down left and right. And it's just, maybe with the different kind of offseason that we had, no preseason games, guys just weren't ready. But I mean, it's scary to see because, I mean, this is the guy's primary plan right now. And if they get hurt and they don't get signed, I mean, what are they going to do? So, yeah, you really feel for these guys right now.
You do. It's just a real bummer for both these guys, both kind of guys that you thought had potential to break out this year. But, the Colts fortunately have depth, and that'll help them out as they go along in the season because injuries happen. This is the NFL. Stuff happens. It just stinks that it has to happen to these two guys who have struggled with injuries so far in their careers. So let's move on to this game now. The Colts thoroughly dominated this game, in every category pretty much. From total plays, the Colts outsnapped the Vikings by 20 total plays, had 354 yards as opposed to the Vikings 175. The Colts averaged 5.3 yards per play. They only had 203 yards passing, but they were very, very even because they had 151 yards rushing as well. And the Colts had 24 first downs. One thing that you would have to say that they have to improve on for sure is the third down conversions. They were not great at third down.
Yes.
I believe they were where is it now? They were not very good. I believe there was something like 3 of 11. Here it is. They were 3 of 11 on third down, and they were 2 of 4 in the red zone. You'd like to see that go up a little bit, but overall, the Colts dominated. They dominated the time of possession. They had it for over 38 minutes to the Vikings 21-35. So overall, the Colts really dominated on offense, really this entire game. And what is your overall thoughts just on the Colts' domination from really start to finish in this game?
Yeah, I think I hate to say it started early, but it did. It was, the first consecutive touches we got to see from Jonathan Taylor that really set the tone for this game. The way the Colts were able to run the ball and just control that aspect opened up everything else. And I think that's going to be the plan moving forward, is that if you can start the run game, that opens up play action. Like it's simple football stuff here. Just having a strong run game opens up everything else. And again, Phillip Rivers didn't have to throw the ball 40 times. He threw it 25 times and only threw 1 pick. So we're getting somewhere. I mean, obviously you would like to see him throw no picks, but I don't know if you can completely put that one on him, but that's beside the point. But I think, it started early, and it started with dominating the line and being able to establish the run game. And that's what you like to see. And having a strong run game, like you mentioned, time of possession, that's going to be huge because sometimes, keeping the other team's offense off the field is what matters most in some games. So I think if we can establish this type of run game every game, we're going to be set for the season.
For sure. And, you see even in the attempts that Phillip Rivers had, he only had 25 attempts. He nearly cut it in half from a week ago. 214 yards. He had a touchdown, had an interception, which we'll talk about. Overall was a very efficient day for Phillip Rivers, 97.8 quarterback rating, or just rating there, quarterback rating of 36.2. So Phillip Rivers looks pretty efficient here in his home opener with Indianapolis.
Yeah, and it was great to see, and it was reassuring after his, week one where you're like, man, I hope he doesn't have to throw the ball 40 sometimes, and 2-3 interceptions a game. Like, this just isn't going to go well. This is the type of Phillip Rivers that the Colts want to utilize, where he throws the ball 20, 25 times, and you rely on your run game first, and then Phillip Rivers passing second, because it did bail us out sometimes. When we needed it, it was there. So obviously, like you said, I'd like to see him clean it up on third downs, but I was pretty pleased with how our offense ran, especially seeing what it looked like in week one.
Yeah, for sure. And then moving on to the running game, 151 yards. The Colts in total ran it 40 times. The Vikings only ran it 18, so the Colts doubled on the attempts of the Vikings, more than doubled it. Jonathan Taylor led the way with 26 carries for 101 yards and a touchdown, his first career touchdown, his first career 100-yard game. He was the first Colts rookie running back to do that since Vic Ballard in 2012. So Jonathan Taylor had a pretty good day overall. There were some things he definitely had to clean up. The 3.9 average isn't eye-popping by any means, but he definitely showed that he can be kind of that bell cow type of running back that you need. Because, the next guy who ran the ball only had 9 attempts. So overall, Jonathan Taylor really, got the lion's share of carries.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see what we would do if Taylor wasn't having this kind of success, like who we would turn to, because we'll get into it later, but like Nyheim Hines was pretty much irrelevant this game after his week one performance. So Taylor was the guy. They fed the hot hand. What I liked about this is he just puts his head down and goes, like, is not afraid of contact. He had that one really flashy play, but other than that, he just put his head down, got north, and just tried to take on whoever was in his way, and he fought against, sometimes 2-3 defenders, and was able to keep charging ahead. So that, I love that type of running back. Just get your head down, get to work, bust through the holes. And I think, his first career start, and he's already had 100 yards. I think it's, he's lined up for great success.
He is. And there's just different things with, this is his second career game. He had no preseason games, no OTAs, none of that. And I think overall he performed pretty well. There's still some things he got to work on. I felt like there were some cuts he could have made. Sure. But, overall, Jonathan Taylor had a pretty solid day in his rookie debut, and he took the share of carries. Jordan Wilkins had 9 carries for 40 yards. Had a little bit better average, 4.4 yards per carry. He was a very efficient guy, a guy we didn't see really in week one. But with Marlon Mack going down for the year, Jordan Wilkins really stepped into a role, and I thought he performed pretty well given the circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. I think most of his touches were kind of sprinkled during the beginning of the game, and then more so towards the fourth quarter. But you like what you see out of him. With that, essentially he's our 4th-string running back, and you can slot him in and still get that kind of efficient performance. I think, this running back core is deep, and that's why they kept 4 running backs on the roster. And I think, Matt goes down and we're still able to bounce back this way, I think is really great to hear from our running core.
Absolutely. And then let's move on to the receiving game. Mo Alley-Cox, he stepped in. He was initially, at the beginning of the year, slated as tight end number 3. Well, Jack Doyle, Trey Burton out for this game. Mo Alley-Cox steps up. He has 5 catches, 111 yards, out of 6 targets. He has that one kind of pass deflects off his hands and goes in. It's kind of a freak type of thing, flies into the defender's hands. But I thought he really bounced back well after that and led the Colts in receptions and also in yards. What was your overall impression of Mo Alley?
I did not see this coming. Like, when it was like Mo Alley-Cox and Noah Tongiai, I'm like, we're gonna be in a little bit of trouble. And especially after that first, like you mentioned, that tip that ended up turning into a pick, I'm like, oh great, here we go. We're really missing Jack Doyle and Trey Burton. But then he switched it up. He got focused again and was the lead receiver. Like, this is great to see. Again, just the depth that the Colts have. I think this is what this game spoke to. It's the depth that the Colts have. And your 3rd-string tight end comes in and gets you 5 receptions for 111 yards. Like, I'm fine with that. Now, do I hope that we get Doyle and Burton back? Absolutely. But I think, in his little fill-in time, he did fairly well.
Yeah. This is a question that I've seen kind of posed around, Colts Twitter, Colts Facebook. Do you think Mo Cox deserves, based off of this performance, to get a little bit more run with the starters, even if Jack Doyle and Trey Burton come back?
Yeah, so I saw this too, and I interacted a little bit with some posts. I still got to go with Jack Doyle. I think he's just, tried and true, your guy. Blocking's a huge part, and I don't know. I mean, do I think Mo Cox could be a starter? Yes, but I think he just needs more time. I mean, this was a great showing, but I think he just needs to be able to repeat this performance before I'm willing to put him as the starter, quote unquote. But to answer, the question, do you think he should get more reps with the starters? Yes, absolutely, because I think he could get there. Do I think he's there right now? No. And going into the game, there were some questions about the Vikings secondary and stuff like that. So I want to see him in a couple more matches before I, firmly say he could be a starting tight end.
Yeah, I mean, at least the Colts need to look using him in the red zone. I mean, he's ginormous.
Yeah.
You saw that play. I believe it was like the third quarter potentially. I can't remember when exactly it was, but, Phillip Rivers just throws a pass up to him. He just out jumps. It really looked like a high schooler against an elementary school.
Yeah.
People playing flag football. Like, that's what it looked like. Mo Cox is just so much bigger than everybody else. And he just went up there and he got it. He made a big boy catch there. And so I think the Colts definitely should explore using him in that department a little bit more. Michael Pittman was second on the team. He had 4 catches, 37 yards on 6 targets. A pretty overall solid and efficient day for Michael Pittman. Didn't really stand out that much. Had a couple nice catches. And he's the leading receiver for these receiving core, if that tells you anything about how much the Colts spread the ball out and didn't really, pass it a ton. Then T.Y. Hilton had 3 catches, 28 yards, had the big long drop that he should have caught for a touchdown. I know he said, the sun was in, Frank Reich said the sun was in his eyes and stuff, but overall just unacceptable from your veteran. Like, that can't happen. And so
and here's my point about this. Everyone is now saying that, we should have never had this open roof concept. That's what's screwing us up. The sun on half the field. Whatever, guys. T.Y. Hilton has played in Lucas Oil Stadium for a majority of it. He should be used to having to make catches in the sun. Like, I don't think this is anything new. Like catching a ball in the sun should be something it's not easy by any means. And I know I couldn't do it, but it should be something that you're practicing and that you should be able to do with as tenured of a career as you have, especially in the stadium. So especially after the drops in week 1, now this crucial, did it matter in the long run? No. But in a contract year, he drops a touchdown. Is this something that's going to keep up? I definitely think it's something that we need to watch moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. And it comes to the point where I'm like, okay, you can talk and say I'm going to improve, but if you're not showing it,
right?
Like, something has to happen. And so, I love T.Y. Hilton. I'm a big T.Y. Hilton fan. Like, I've loved T.Y. Hilton ever since he was drafted by the Colts, but that you just can't have that from your veteran. Your leader in that offense, in the receiving core. He's dropping passes like that. You can't have that from him. And so, T.Y. Hilton knows it. T.Y. Hilton's a pro. And, I have faith in him that he'll step up and he'll make up for it. But, yeah, that is something to monitor going in now to a contract here, like you said.
Yep.
Like, honestly, based off of these 2 performances, I wouldn't not re-sign him at this point. It's not nothing special. I know it's only 2 weeks in. But, he definitely needs to step it up a little bit. If I'm Phillip Rivers, I'm just like, man, I've given him some chances and he's dropped passes so far,
Yeah, and here's my thing about that. After the drop, Phillip Rivers went back to T.Y. the next play, so for him to try to make up for it. And it was like he threw it into tight coverage, and T.Y. had to jump over the guy's back. And I'm like, okay, that's not what you're supposed to do. He dropped it. Yes, we know T.Y.'s a great receiver. You don't have to go back to him the next play to try to have him make up for it. Just keep playing your offense. It'll work out. And going back to the contract thing, we saw what Paris Campbell can do in week 1. Hopefully he comes back. We can see more of him. Pittman has looked pretty good. And the 2 games that we've got to see him, there's Zach Pascal. So, T.Y.'s, there's a little bit of competition, and there's receivers coming up that he's going to have to watch out for because they're going to be cheaper, in at least the short term, depending on what kind of contract T.Y. wants. But, yeah, it's definitely something to watch out for. And, if he wants to say improvement is going from 2 drops to 1 drop, okay. But then week 3, that means no drops. You catch everything that's catchable that's thrown your way.
Right, for sure. Yeah, that's what we're going to be looking for. All right, well, we can move over now to the defense. Let's talk about this defense. I mean, gosh, you look at these Vikings stats, it looks like you're playing against the rookie mode on Madden. Like, it's just like that's how bad the Vikings offense was. I mean, Kirk Cousins, 11 of 26, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 3 sacks against him. This is insane. His rating is 15.9. You didn't hear that wrong. 15.9. Phil, I mean, this is by far one of the worst performances out of a quarterback, especially a quarterback that's supposed to be, you know, he's one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league. It's crazy how poor he played.
So you want to hear a good one?
Yeah.
So Justin, our social media manager, started Kirk Cousins. He had Drew Lock on his bench. What's funny is that even though Drew Lock went down and had negative points, he scored higher than Kirk Cousins did. And Drew Lock literally played maybe halfway through the first quarter of the game. And he had negative points. But that's how bad Kirk Cousins' performance was. And just real quick, and then I'll get off my soapbox here. All like the morning news today for sports. If this game was talked about at all, it was talked about how bad and how down the Minnesota Vikings played. It wasn't that the Colts played good or our defense was crazy or that this is what the Colts was hyped up and could be and Jonathan Taylor's incredible performance. It was how bad Kirk Cousins was and how bad the Vikings were. And I'm like, yes, the Vikings were bad in this game, but it was because of what we did. Like, it's not like they're trying to make it seem like the Vikings are failing on their own. And I don't think that was the case in this game. Like, our defense was a problem.
Yeah. It was. And, I mean, they got to the quarterback 3 times, like I said. Consistent pressure throughout. That's something we felt like they needed to do. It's weird because they had less sacks in this game, but they had so much more pressure. It felt like, you know, you were forcing Kirk Cousins to do a lot more. You were getting pressure in his face a lot more than he did against Gardner Minshew. It's crazy because, like, on the first drive alone, the Colts forced more incompletions than they did the entire game against Jacksonville.
Yeah.
It's just crazy how that happens. And, I mean, you know, you have 3 interceptions, which is awesome. You know, you have Corey Willis get that interception. Julian Blackmon kind of tips it to him. Kenny Moore gets an interception. TJ Carey gets one at the end of the half. You know, DeForest Buckner was a force for the Colts. I mean, insane kind of things like a sack and a half. With one of those sacks, he forced a safety. So, you know, he was just a force to be reckoned with on that defensive line. This defensive line just overall played very, very well.
Yeah, and I think this is what we were expecting in the Jacksonville game, and then they finally got everything together in this game. I love the way that DeForest Buckner can just open things up, because if it's not him getting to the quarterback, it's him drawing pressure away so someone else can get to the quarterback, because you have to almost double team him. And that's the thing. And that's what opens up guys like Danico Autry, Justin Houston, Tyquan Lewis. I mean, they all were charging together, and DeForest Buckner is just a huge presence that it forces guys to kind of shake up coverage and mix it up that allows some of our other guys to break through. And I mean, we stopped the run game, which I think was something they were trying to get established. I'm not entirely sure, but we did a really great job of stopping that. And yeah, like on that safety play, I mean, it was just DeForest Buckner, or it was Danico Autry who got the pressure, and then, you know, Kirk Cousins just fell right into DeForest Buckner's lap there. So I just love the chemistry. I love the way that this line is working together.
Yeah, they were phenomenal. And one thing that we said they're going to have to do is stop Adam Thielen. I mean, he had 3 catches for 31 yards. The majority of those came in that first drive. And then beyond that, he really was silent the whole game. So, you know, their leading receiver had 3 catches for 44 yards. That was Justin Jefferson. And he got some of those in garbage time. So overall, man, this defense just played out of their minds, lights out. Certainly was not expected, especially with Rocky Sin, you know, basically being out right before the game, ruled out right before the game. I mean, you were out there having Xavier Rhodes and TJ Carey as your starting corners for the outside. I mean, we thought, oh man, Kirk Cousins is going to have himself a field day.
Yeah.
And then the Colts tightened up. You know, they played a lot closer to the receivers, and you know, they made Kirk Cousins make good throws, and he couldn't do it. And they also were pressuring him. So overall, I felt like this defense was probably one of the best defensive performances I've seen from this team in a long, long time.
Oh, totally, yeah. And I would add, too, despite all the injuries that we've seen, because most of them were on the defensive side. Rocky Sin was out before the game. Xavier Rhodes was battling, you know, cramps there in the second half. Matt Adams went down. Malik Hooker went down. So we had to have guys step up and just to have that consistent pressure with all these kind of moving pieces, I thought was tremendous. I saw another stat somewhere where like Bobby Okereke is starting to get some more time in there as well, which I love to see, mixing it up with the linebackers that we have. So I'm really excited now that this defense seems like they have everything figured out and are working together. I'm really excited for what they can do.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, this defense seems like it's totally coming together now. The last thing we'll talk about here are the special teams. I thought the special teams was lights out for the Colts. I mean, Rodrigo Blankenship, he came in. Obviously, he was 2 for 3 last week in Jacksonville. I liked how he came back after, he missed that number 2 kick, came back, made his 3rd field goal. He was perfect on the day. So he's now connected on 5 field goals in a row. He made all his extra points as well. His long was 44. Overall, he was good. And then, Rigo Sanchez was really good as a punter. And Luke Rhodes, had that incredible down, like within like the 5-yard line on one of those punts. And that was the play, that was the drive after that where the Colts forced, the safety to happen. So overall, I felt like it was a great day. The Colts they always seemed like they were in positive field position. They always felt like they were pinning the Vikings deep. What were your overall impressions of the special teams unit?
Oh my God. I mean, could not talk enough about them. Like just how aggressive they were and how motivated they were to get the job done. I mean, even Hines on some of the returns and Ashton Doolin, like that was great. The play you mentioned by Luke Rhodes was spectacular. And I just think, special teams is sometimes an overlooked part of the game, but it's extremely important because it leads to those safeties. It leads to those great field positions where you might only have to work maybe half the field, maybe less than that. So I think special teams is going to be a strong suit. For some reason, I feel like the Colts always have good special teams, but I loved what I saw from this week 2 group. And, as much as I'm excited for Blankenship to go perfect 4 for 4, I would really like us to score more touchdowns, but I'm glad that he's hitting it. Like no complaints here. I just wish we wouldn't have to force him, to have to kick like 4 field goals a game. I wish we could capitalize a little bit there.
Yeah, definitely. Red zone offense is something the Colts are going to have to work on. They weren't awful, but they were 50%, so they need to work on that as well as third downs. Yeah. All right, let's move to some of your takeaways, Jacob. What were some of your biggest takeaways from this game?
Yeah, so I've hinted about all 3 of these during the podcast here. My first one, Jonathan Taylor is legit. I know after week 1 we weren't too sure where we stood with our run game. Jonathan Taylor is legit. Gets 100 yards plus in his first career start. But one thing I would like to note here, Nyheim Hines is still on the roster, guys. Like we can still use him because I was very shocked by the way he was used in week 1 to now his I think he had like 1 catch for 4 yards in week 2. So I hope they get him more involved because we have a lot of backs that can do a lot of things. So I want to keep Nyheim Hines a part of this. But yeah, Jonathan Taylor, if you can get him going, he invites the contact, he pushes through that, and he's able to punch through those lines. I love it, and I'm super excited for it. With our offensive line, I think it's going to be great. Another point, like we just were talking about, our special teams is aggressive, and I love it. They almost had a strip on a kickoff here. The referee blew the whistle, and the ball popped out. I mean, but still, great pressure there, aggressive tackling. Our punt coverage, with that play by Luke Rhodes was spectacular. And he's the long snapper. So he's got he gets no head start. He's got to snap the ball, block, and then sprint down the field. And he's still able to get there and make that nimble play to keep it in bounds. So love what I'm seeing from them. And then lastly here, as much as I love Hot Rod, we got to finish off drives. 4 field goals and only 2 touchdowns. And like you mentioned, the red zone stats there, we need to score more touchdowns. And whether that's giving the ball to Taylor more, whether that's, trusting Phillip to throw to some big targets like Pittman and Mo Alley Cox. Like we have to score more touchdowns because we got out of this game fairly well. But I don't know if it's always going to be that moving forward. I think we're going to have to start scoring more touchdowns to stay ahead and to keep up on our opponents.
Yeah, definitely agree. I agree with all those points. I'll go to mine now, my kind of 3 takeaways from this game. I love that the Colts got back to their identity of running the ball. Like, I'm glad that they could do that. Last week, they really got away from it, and we were very confused on last week's podcast, like why why would you abandon the run? I mean, you just invested a pretty high pick on a running back. And you still have Jordan Wilkins on your roster. Why are you going away from the run? So I was glad to see that the Colts did that. Jonathan Taylor looked good. It was always awesome to see him. The thing I love about him is like he's so big, and he also always seems like he's falling forward and getting a couple extra yards. So I love seeing that. I love seeing what I saw from Jordan Wilkins. He only had 9 carries, but I mean, he really, that game was pretty much over, but he ran the clock out, near the end of that game. And I just loved what I've seen from him. I've always been a Jordan Wilkins guy, and I'm glad to see him getting a little bit more run there.
And I'll add real quick. Yeah. He ran not like the game was over and it was garbage time. He ran like it was still a competitive game. And I think that's what you need from your now third was 4th string running back. You need a guy that's even in garbage time is still going to give you that energy, is still going to give you that motivation to steal the game, because it would have been very easy for him to sit back, get 1 or 2 yards just to drain the clock. But he was still pounding it and still acting like it was, it was a competitive game in the first quarter.
Yeah, and I love that the Colts feel like they still have the personnel, and they feel like they can still run it down people's throats, teams' throats, and really break their will. Yeah. And that's what the Colts did with this Vikings defense. It seemed like they just kept doing that, and I love to see that. The second thing I kind of took away, I loved what I saw from Julian Blackmon. Now, he was on a pitch count. He only played 32 snaps, but man, this guy is a physical freak. I mean, he tore his ACL not too long ago. He's already back, and he's already making plays. He's already almost back to 100%, if not there already. And, the Malik Hooker news obviously sucks. I think I was more torn up about the Paris Campbell news because, like I said earlier, you have a lot more depth at the safety position. And Julian Blackmon, I know it's just a small sample size, but he helps me, him and George Odom, those two safeties, they help me sleep a little bit better at night. You have a lot of insurance. Right, for Malik Hooker, because it was inevitable. You obviously didn't think this was going to happen in terms of like a significant injury, but I mean, Malik Hooker, ever since he's been drafted, he's never played a full season. So you thought he'd probably miss at least a couple games. So it's great that you invested. It's kind of crazy to think about this. I'll go off on a tangent here for a second, but it's kind of interesting that like all the positions that have had significant injuries, the Colts have also invested other resources in this season. You think running back, Jonathan Taylor, receiver, Michael Pittman, and then now obviously safety, Julian Blackmon. Your first 3 picks are, positions that needed more depth, and that's exactly why, because none of these guys have been healthy so far. So I love to see that, and I loved what I saw from Julian Blackmon. I'm excited to see him in more of an extended role to see if indeed he is your starting free safety. And if he performs like he did this last week, I mean, man, you got a steal there in the 3rd round. I really felt like he was definitely a higher talent than a 3rd round talent. And the fact that he recovered that quickly, I mean, this pick I think is going to end up being a steal based off of what we saw. So
totally. I think he tweeted after the game something like I should have been a 1st round pick. And it's, and it was like, well, maybe I need to see more of it, obviously, but like you had that motivation, and that's awesome to see. I want to expand your draft concept here, because Rocky Sin also had an illness. Now, Isaiah Rodgers didn't play, but he was there. Adam Vinatieri was plagued with injuries last year, and that's why we have Hot Rod, obviously. But just it's crazy to think about that, especially the injuries that just happened and the way we drafted. That is so weird. I didn't think of that until now. That's a great point.
It's like, I mean, you never want an injury, but it's like if you had a significant injury, you wanted the positions you've already invested more resources in. So it's like Ballard knew what he was doing, man. We were shocked when he took a running back. He knew. I mean, he knew that Mack hadn't played a full 16-game season either. As much as we love Marlon Mack, I mean, it's true.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think that we did that in hindsight, but all these other teams are now scrambling to try to sign people or move people around to kind of fill these positions after all the injuries in week 2. But it's like the Colts are like, okay, obviously we don't want to see these guys injured, but we're able to move on and adapt and change and still be a very good team moving out of this.
Right. You don't feel like there's a major drop off either, which is wild. You have so much depth. If a guy goes down, it stinks, but okay, you're good. You have another guy that can step in there and you feel pretty good about. So, and then for my third point here, I love the adjustment the Colts coaching staff made. We called them out in week 1. We said that was a terrible game from them. Awful performance. They need to step it up. And what they do, they stepped it up, specifically the defense and Matt Eberflus. I mean, shout out to him. That was a great game plan. I mean, kind of figuring out the personnel you have. I know we had a lot of new personnel, so maybe it took a little bit of time to get them, figured out, like, okay, how do we best utilize their strengths? But overall, I felt like I love the game plan against the Vikings. I mean, you played a lot more closer to the receivers and jamming the receivers at the line. I love that. I just love even the special teams adjustments a little bit, and the coach, and the emphasis on running the football. All these adjustments that the Colts coaching staff's made, I really like them quite a lot. So those are my three kind of takeaways: Wilkins and this running game, and Jonathan Taylor, Julian Blackmon, and then the adjustments the Colts coaching staff made.
Yeah, I love that last one because on the preview pod for this Viking games we were talking, and I was like, no one should listen to me. Like, but I picked the Vikings because I wanted the Colts to be motivated and I wanted changes to be made. And as a fan, I can sit back now and say, okay, the changes have been made. This is the Indianapolis Colts team that I thought we were going to get. And I can't get over, I know it's week 2. I know it's our first win, but like, I just can't get over how excited I am for this team moving forward, because I honestly think they've got it figured out. Like, and obviously they'll have to make adjustments along the way. That's every team, but like, they've got an idea of what this team does well and what works well. And I'm super excited. The coaches got it fixed. It only took a week, surprisingly, after they had so much time, in the off season, but it only took a week to get back on track here. So, and I look to even have success coming up, in week 3 against the Jets.
Yeah. I mean, and I think not that it's to justify that loss at all, but they're not as bad as everybody thought. Like
that is true.
They almost beat the Titans this past week. So like, as bad as we said that loss was, and it was, like, there was a lot of dumb things they did. Mm-hmm. Like, I look at it from like, okay, the Colts haven't won in Jacksonville since when? Jacksonville's not as bad as we initially thought. And so, I mean, it's not like justifying it by any means, but like, right. It makes me feel a little bit better about the state of where this team is. Because I was like, if Jacksonville's a 2-win team, you got a lot of problems. But they're looking a lot better than they are. So I think that helps a lot. The last thing we'll talk about. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'd add to that real quick, too. We were questioning our run game, especially after the Jacksonville game, because we couldn't get anything going. But then they were able to pretty much contain Derrick Henry. I mean, he didn't have a great game by any means. So I think Jacksonville has earned a little more respect in my book, even with the loss to Tennessee. It's like, okay, maybe we were a little like, oh my gosh, we lost the Jacksonville Jaguars, when we should be like, okay, it was a loss, but the AFC South is a competitive division, I would say, from 1 to 4.
Yeah, it's always competitive, though, honestly. Yeah. Like, within the division, no matter if your team's terrible or not, like, a lot of times they play each other tough because we know each other so well. So I definitely, I mean, it helps me a little bit, like, justify that game. I mean, a little bit. Yeah. I mean, I'm still upset about it, but
right.
The last thing we'll talk about, so we just posted a game recap. Anthony, one of our writers, he posted a game recap. It's titled Indianapolis Gets Their First Win of the Season versus Minnesota. Be sure to check that out. You can go to the Brawl Network, www.thebrawlnetwork.com/Indianapolis-Colts. And also be on the lookout for a preview article coming for the Colts Week 3 matchup with the New York Jets coming out later this week. Be sure to check that out, guys. All I'm saying, Jacob, the Colts better smash the Jets. Like, the Jets are an awful football team. The Colts cannot take their foot off the pedal. If they lose to the Jets, man, I mean, like, I said that about the Jaguars, but, like, the Jets legitimately are probably the worst team in the league at this point.
Yeah. If we lose to the Jets, it's back to the drawing board. Like, and I'll be one of those fans that is like, all right, it's time for change. Because, like, after the week 1 loss, I was like, I'm not ready to change yet. But if we lose to the Jets, I might be in that camp. I mean, it's going to be so weird if we go from the low of Jacksonville to the high of beating Minnesota at home to then another low against the Jets. Let's eliminate that from our minds, guys. Like, we're going to go into New York and have a great game. We're going to keep up our pressure and get the first road win of the season.
I believe it's actually at home. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I believe it's Colts stay at home.
I think
they host the Jets. So that'll be a little bit.
If I read the schedule right.
Yeah, no, you're good. I think that's what's going to happen. So hopefully the Colts, that they get a lot more confidence in this game, but they don't overlook the Jets because, like we said, in every single game, these are still pros. It doesn't matter if the Jets are terrible. they could come in and they could beat you. Like, you just can never overlook a team. And hopefully the Colts learn from Jacksonville that hard lesson, and hopefully, man, they stay focused and they just do what they should do against the Jets here in Week 3.
Yeah, I mean, real quick, the Jets have pretty much a hodgepodge of Colts teams and players on there. So there are some guys that might know what's up. So we just got to be on the lookout and be ready to go. Yeah,
for sure. All right, well, that'll do it for our recap episode. Colts victorious. Colts start off 1-1 on the season after 2 weeks after defeating the Minnesota Vikings 28-11. Thanks, guys, so much for listening. And as always, go Colts.